All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're talking about your brain's operating system. All that internal wiring that's running in the background pretty much all the time, shaping how you react, how you feel, and basically how you navigate your entire world.
So, have you ever had one of those moments? You walk into a crowded room, maybe a party or a busy cafe, and it's just bam. It feels like every conversation, every clinking glass, every single bright light is hitting you all at once. It's like total sensory overload, right? So, what is actually happening inside your brain when that feeling takes over?
Okay, to get our heads around this, we're going to start with a really cool metaphor. I want you to think about your entire nervous system, but not as some cold, complex machine. Instead, picture it as a living, breathing, growing tree. You know how a tree's roots are constantly pulling in water and nutrients from the soil? Well, our nervous system does the exact same thing, but with information. It's always taking in sights, sounds, textures, everything from our environment. And this isn't just a one-way street. It's a constant, dynamic conversation that we're having with the world around us every second of the day. So let's break this tree metaphor down a little bit. Think of those tiny little root hairs. Those are like our sensory receptors, our first point of contact with the world. Then you've got the trunk and the big branches. Those are the nerve pathways, the superhighways carrying all that information up. And the best part? The tree's growth. What does that represent? Well, that's our brain's absolutely incredible ability to change. And that amazing ability to change has a scientific name you've probably heard of, neuroplasticity. This is a huge deal. It means your brain isn't this static, fixed thing you're born with. Not at all. Based on your experiences, it can literally grow new connections and strengthen its pathways, kind of like a tree twisting and reaching for the best sunlight. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Just like with a tree, it's all about balance. Right? You overwater a tree, it's going to droop. You stick it in a dark closet, it's not going to do so well. Our nervous system is exactly the same. It needs that Goldilocks amount of stimulation, not too much, not too little, but just right to really thrive. Too much, and we get totally overwhelmed. And too little, we can end up feeling bored or zoned out or just blah. Okay, so we've got our nervous system, our tree, taking in all this information. Now let's zoom in. We're going to focus on a really specific part of the brain that acts like a super important filter for everything coming in. Deep down in your brainstem, there's a little gatekeeper, and it's called the reticular activating system, or just RAS for short. And you can think of it like the bouncer at a nightclub deciding who gets in. Or maybe even better, think of it like the security gate at an airport. Its whole job is to manage the flow of traffic. So here's how this airport security in your brain works. All of this sensory data, I'm talking about the hum of your computer, the feeling of the tag on your shirt, the person talking in the next room, it all arrives at the gate. The RAS scans everything and basically asks two questions. Is this important? And is this a threat? Then it filters out all the useless background noise so you're not distracted by everything, and it lets only the important stuff through to the rest of your brain. And this is where you can really see the difference between a gatekeeper that's doing its job and one that's just completely overwhelmed. When your RAS is well-regulated, you feel calm, you feel focused. Simple. But when it's overwhelmed, the floodgates open. It lets everything through. And that sends you into a state of hypervigilance where every little sound, every flicker of light feels like a massive threat. And it just triggers your body's big red alarm system. And that big red alarm, that's the famous fight or flight response. It's a totally automatic survival mechanism run by your sympathetic nervous system. You know the feeling. Your heart starts pounding, your muscles get tight, your breath gets shallow. Your body is preparing you to either fight off a predator or run for your life. The crazy part is, this can happen even when the danger is just a really crowded grocery store on a Saturday. All right, so let's say a piece of information makes it past the gatekeeper. What happens next? Where does it go? Well, it travels to the emotional core of your brain. And this is where a simple sensation starts to turn into something much, much more. We call this emotional brain the limbic system. And to keep our metaphors rolling, let's picture it like an apple, buried deep inside the center of the larger brain. Now, the sequence here is super important, and it's always the same. First, you get the physical sensation. That then triggers an emotion, and only after all that does a conscious thought come into play. So remember, feeling, then emotion, then thought. Now, this is what I find absolutely fascinating. Our brain has two different highways for dealing with something it thinks is a threat.
There's the short path, which is like a direct, high-speed connection straight from your senses to your emotional brain. This is pure automatic reaction. But then there's the long path. This one takes a detour. It sends that emotional info up to the thinking brain first. This gives you a slower, more thoughtful response. It's the difference between jumping a mile when something touches your arm versus taking a half second to realize it's just a friend trying to get your attention. So, the million-dollar question is, how do we get our brains to use that long path more often? How do we stop the knee-jerk reactions? Well, it's all about strengthening the parts of the brain that act as the leaders, the ones that are supposed to integrate all this incoming data. So let me introduce you to the insular cortex, or the IC. Think of this as your brain's main self-regulation hub. It's an incredible piece of wiring that connects what your body is physically feeling, like a knot in your stomach, with your emotional awareness. It's what helps you come up with a response that actually makes sense in a social situation. This is a huge player in things like empathy and self-awareness. And finally, we get to the big boss, the CEO of the entire operation, your prefrontal cortex. It's located right behind your forehead. This is where all your executive functions live. It's the part that makes sense of your emotions, that governs your decision-making and judgment. And, most importantly, it's the part that can slam on the brakes when your emotional brain wants to do something impulsive. This is the part of you that chooses to take that thoughtful, long path. Okay, so now that we know how the whole system is supposed to work, how can we, actually work on strengthening it? How can we make it better? Luckily, the source material gives us a really clear toolkit, and it's all built on a few core principles. And it really all boils down to just 4 key principles. 4 things you can focus on to build better self-regulation and strengthen all those pathways we've been talking about. Okay, here they are. First up, multi-sensory integration. This is all about helping your senses work together in a way that's calming. For example, you could try really focusing on the feeling of your feet on the floor while you listen to some quiet music. Simple, right? Number 2 is emotional regulation. This is just the ability to notice and manage your emotional responses instead of letting them hijack the whole show. It can be as simple as taking one single deep breath before you react when you're stressed. Number 3, executive functioning. This is where you actively train the CEO of your brain, that prefrontal cortex. You can do this with stuff like planning out your day, or even just doing a puzzle that makes you think and problem solve. And finally, number 4 is mindfulness. This is that powerful practice of just paying attention to what's happening right now without judging it. Doing this helps train your brain's gatekeeper to calm down and focus on what's actually important. And honestly, this is the most hopeful and incredible part of this entire story. As Dr. Varlisha Gibbs, the author of the material we're looking at today, puts it so well, because of that thing we talked about, neuroplasticity, our brains are not set in stone. Change and growth are always possible. So I want to leave you with one final thought to take with you. Now that you kind of get the system, the tree, the airport security gate, the CEO, just take a second to check in with yourself. How's your brain's gatekeeper doing today? Is it feeling pretty balanced? Letting in just the right amount of stuff? Or maybe it's time to give it a little extra support?